Hi everyone, hope you're well. This is another episode of Jodi Dancers Talks, and today we have Harmeet from Sikh Your Mind with us. Hi Harmeet.
Hi. Hi, how are you? Nice
Yeah.
to be part of this discussion.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us today.
So we came across Sikh Your Mind, and obviously we realised that there was a lot of great work going on. And prior to this, we had an initial chat with yourself, and I think it'll be fitting if we started with your own experiences with mental health first. And I know recently it's Children's Mental Health Week, so I just wanted to ask you about your experiences with mental health as a child.
Yeah, sure. So I think for me, the first time that I really understood or began to really understand anything about mental health was when I lost my father. So and he kind of passed away before his time. So he's only 49 years old. But my dad was in and out of hospital quite a lot. So for as long as I remember, he wasn't very well at all. And so we kind of got used to that. And I mean, I have to say, it must have, as a child, it must have impacted me in some way. I can only imagine, looking back at it now, it just maybe helps to explain some of the emotions and some of the things that I went through. But when my dad passed away, I had this really horrible sinking feeling and just feeling really low in my mood and being down and things like that. So I think that's the first time that, I had that kind of feeling of being depressed, and losing interest in things that I would normally want to do, and being really sort of focused just on the fact that he had passed on. So obviously it's a bereavement, it's someone very close. But I was 21 years old at the time, so I was an adult, but just not very prepared to deal with that situation. I don't think with things like that, like losing a loved one, you can ever be prepared for it, regardless of how old you are or how old they are. You just never know how your mind is going to react to something like that. So that definitely was, there were some very difficult years growing up and not having, there were times I remember when I was about 14, 15 years old, and he'd had a heart attack at that time, for example. And, we didn't know if my dad was going to survive because he had to have like emergency surgery. So when we said goodbye to him, me and my sister, we didn't know if he was going to make it, through the night. So we went through some of those types of traumatic events where we nearly lost him before as well. So when I was a child. So I would say that there was quite that build up of emotions, of just, mentally, like how must that affect a child growing up with, it's not what we would describe, I don't like using the word normal, but it's not your usual kind of situation. You kind of hope that you're going to have both your parents there, they're both fine, they're in good health, and you're just getting on with your life, that kind of thing. And so you certainly don't expect to lose someone at the age that he went. So but it happens. So that was my childhood in a nutshell. There wasn't that stability, I think, as a child, because we were in and out of hospital a lot. So I think I felt like I always lived in this fight, flight, freeze mode at that time. Like I kind of feel that now, looking back at it, that it was almost like you're on edge about what is going to happen to my dad. Like, is he going to be all right? Is something bad going to happen to him? And really trying to get your head around, trying to understand what it is. And I'm sure like there's loads of children out there that have to go through this daily. I'm certainly not the only one, but I just feel that there is so much support that is needed for children when they're going through something like that. And we did have family, and we had friends, we had family, we had obviously our school as well, to support. But it's also the fact that your mum is now busy with dealing with your dad. And I had to learn things like cooking and just like taking care of the family at quite a young age. So it's almost like, I think you don't get that full sort of picture of what a childhood should be like when you're in that that mode of life where your thing is just to survive and get through the next day and make sure that your family's all right, and and go to school and pretend like everything's normal, and try and fit in with that life and things like that. So but I found my own way of coping during that time. So yeah.
So there's a few things I want to pick up. The first one is when we talked about children's mental health. So like on a more general scale now, do you think that there's an appropriate outlet for children to express their mental health? Because like you said, at a younger age, it's difficult to grasp your emotion. So do you think that there's appropriate outlets out there currently for children to express their mental health?
Now, I think there is. When I was younger, I don't feel that it was maybe promoted as much. It wasn't readily available or told, like we're not told to express like when it's, we're talking a long time ago. It's a very, very long time ago. So when I was growing up, I had to almost find my own means. But I think now there is more, like, so obviously one of the things that I'm really into is poetry. That's an outlet for me. But for other people, like now, how much do they promote things like journaling? I mean, my daughter was asked to write about their feelings whilst they've been in lockdown, which I thought, like, what a brilliant thing to, like, we wouldn't be asked to do that, like when I was at school, like to talk about our feelings or to write them down. But now they're like promoting, like for their well-being, they're promoting things like journaling. And then there's things like art therapy. So, some children aren't maybe that way inclined. They don't like writing, but they might be able to express through art, or through, drawing, painting, whatever it is that, that they feel that they enjoy. Because it's just expression. So I think there's definitely, for others it might be something like music, a musical instrument. Again, I used to, well, I still do, play the harmonium and do kirtan as a way of, well, it's my escape. As well as connection, it's actually my escape. I can just be somewhere else. And again, if it's basically, I think for children, it's actually figuring out what is it that they enjoy, and actually doing that during the good times, so that if you ever go through a time where it's difficult, you can turn to that thing and that is your outlet, not just trying to pick up something when the bad time comes, because I think it's always so challenging when you're going through a hard time, let alone trying to pick up an outlet during that hard time. I mean, some people do find an outlet during their hard time, but I think it's much better that when we're in a good place, when children are in a good place, if they're taught where to look, to go and find these things and these resources, or just like finding their thing that they're into, is really important. But I think definitely promoting it now, like even in schools, parents, we're doing conscious parenting now, aren't we? Where it's a very different style of parenting. So I think definitely more hands-on with that for kids now.
No, I agree. I think like you've discussed the transition of, or the progression of mental health for children. And it's something simple as well that you can implement on a daily basis. So people that probably are watching this and thinking, oh, my child's fine. Just making sure that they're in a routine where they've got an escape, whether it's a sport, art, music, something, where even if they're happy, they've still got an escape, because they might have pressures that they feel that others might not appreciate, which I think is a valid point.
And I think obviously, like you said, nowadays it's more of conscious parenting, especially with the pandemic. It has brought that up, that it's not just mental health with adults, it's children, and recognizing those signs and picking up on them and just checking in, are you okay? Like, it makes a big difference.
And I think the important thing to highlight is that children won't always talk when we ask the question. You know how, I mean, if you must be familiar with this, I'm very familiar. If I ask my daughter, you know, is everything all right? You're a bit down, or is this something you want to tell mummy? She's, you know, she's not going to really respond to that. I'm fine, I'm fine. So I remember, you know, there was a period where I was just a bit concerned about her, and I created these 2 jars. So one was said positive thoughts, and one said unhelpful thoughts.
Yeah.
And basically, what I would do is I would just say to her, like, here's a little notebook, give her a pen, and said, you know, when you have a positive thought, like in your everyday, just think of a positive thought or 2 positive thoughts, and just put them into the jar. And then if you haven't, and I explained to her what an unhelpful thought was.
Yeah.
And you know, if she had one of those or 2 of those, how many ever she had, she could write them down and put them into that jar. And at the end of the week, we would look into those jars and we would talk about it. And I remember we did that for a little while. I mean, I haven't kept up because these things often, you know, you start them and then it's just so
hard to keep up.
Yeah, but it was such a useful exercise, because I found out so many things that she was thinking about that not in a million years would she would not have told me those things. She was worried about the fact that I was ill at one point, and was I going to be all right, you know. She'd written something about that, and then she'd written that I'm going to have a sibling one day. That was her positive thought.
Aww.
And I was just, you know, because she's an only child, so she's always had this thing. And I just literally thought to myself, wow, like she would never have told me that.
Yeah.
So I think there's always other ways that we can kind of navigate.
But I think that is a very good way, and it's a tip for parents as well.
We have to almost think outside of the box.
Yeah.
And then what I'm getting is a sense of sort of continuity, because people always think of mental health like, sorry, it's like a single episode. I had depression in 2015. Okay, that's done. But whereas it's a continuous, it's for life mental health. And I want you to touch on now your adult life experience of mental health, because you stated to us before you had some experience with it. If you wanted to share with everyone.
Yeah. So with adulthood, transitioning into adulthood. So the next time that I had problems with my mental health was after my daughter was born. So she was born in 2011, and it was the postnatal depression. So which I didn't, I wasn't really clued up about it. I hadn't really read up on it, like a lot of mums prepare themselves, and it's very sort of known now. Postnatal depression, like there's a lot of awareness around it, but for some reason I was very naive to it when I had my daughter, and I was completely oblivious actually, like what it really was. But I just remember, so obviously you have the baby blues and things like that, which is, it's quite natural. Like there's many reasons why you have the baby blues after a few days, which is, your women's hormones are actually dropping. And I think maybe we don't give women much credit for that part, which is, there is something physical going on in your body that is making you feel sad, was making you feel like you want to cry. And it's not because you're upset about, you're happy, you've got the baby, but something is going on and it's just taking its toll on you. So there was that. But as time went on, I think I really struggled with the sleeping. She wasn't a great sleeper. And I just remember not feeling like I had a lot of support around. The other thing was I had not a pleasant delivery at all, which meant I had to have a bit of surgery. I had to have a bit of physio and things like that to kind of regain some of my, you could say, my health basically. And that really took its toll. So I wasn't just dealing with a newborn, I was also dealing with my own health physically. And that was tough for me to kind of, I think, almost digest that this delivery didn't go to plan. It's going to take me a year, because that's what I'd been told. It's going to take you a year to really recover from this. That was a bit of a hard pill to swallow. And I was anemic and things like that, which, a lot of women obviously have that as well. But what happened was that as I started to feel like I didn't have a lot of support around me, I felt. So my husband obviously was there. But then obviously everybody goes back to their own, everyone's got to get on with their lives, right? So my husband went back to work, and then I was with the baby at home. And I don't know what, it was obviously to do with my physical health. The fact that, I had to go for this physio, and there were certain things that had changed about my body. And it was really, it was really difficult to cope with that. And then this newborn that would cry a lot, and she wouldn't sleep, and things like that. And it kept me up. And I just felt like I started to get really down. I started to get really down about it. And then when I remember at 6 weeks old, when she was 6 weeks old, I went out to shopping centre, which was like about 15, 20 minutes away from home. And I went out to the shopping centre thinking, I'm going to muster the courage to go and take my baby out. I need to get out. This is very, it's isolating being at home. But she was 6 weeks old. But then I felt, no, I need to get out. So I thought that I was doing the right thing, and I went out. And when I walked around, and when I went to pay to get into my, when you get your ticket and thing, I had started getting palpitations. I started getting all this overwhelming feeling, dizziness and everything. And I had to sit down for a little while and get some water. There was a cinema nearby. I got some water from there. And I had this baby, and I was thinking, wow, how do I keep this baby safe and look after myself? I'm not feeling good. But anyway, even despite that, I took a little rest, and then I got back into my car, started driving. On the way, I started feeling faint. I just started getting this racing thoughts, and I basically panicked quite badly, and I had to call an ambulance because I thought I was going to pass out. And my baby's crying in the back seat. And the ambulance comes, and then we realized that actually what I had was, so I had obviously low levels of iron, but what I'd had due to my palpitations was a panic attack. That's what I had experienced. There was not anything majorly wrong with my health that wasn't already covered.
Yeah.
So I'd had this panic attack, and after that panic attack, I didn't take my daughter out. I just became so anxious and down that I just was drowning in all of it. I wasn't really telling anyone. I wasn't really communicating. And I was just with this baby. And I just remember feeling really like I clung on to my baby, but I felt so down all the time. I was crying a lot, and I had anxiety about going out. So what I did was I kept myself home for 6 months. I didn't go anywhere without my husband, apart from like my physio appointments and things like that. And even that, he would take me to them. So that went on, for about 6 months, 7 months. And then I started thinking, like, I started to feel really isolated. And then I basically, so I went on to NetMums, and I started like, just, you just get a bit intrigued about like what is out there online and things like that. And I'm from I was from an IT background. So I kind of, quite familiar with all these things, forums and stuff. So I went on that, and I came across this mum who was also based like near me. And she had a boy, had a boy, and they were the same age, and she was looking to meet up with, like, basically have another mum buddy. And so we arranged this through, NetMums, and she met me at a cafe, a Starbucks. I managed to go out, and she turned out to be a GP.
Oh, wow.
So I somehow found the courage after that long to just go to Starbucks, like really close to home, to meet this mum. And but as soon as she told me she was a GP, I just felt like I could relax.
Yeah.
I thought, this person is so going to understand my problems. Yeah. I said to her, it was so difficult for me to get here. It was, I'm like this and that. And I think she just picked up on it straight away that this woman's got postnatal depression. She's got anxiety. She needs help.
Yeah.
And ever since that day, she became a really good friend. She'd come into my home. She'd make me cups of tea. She'd say, let's go to the park. And she would drive us to the park. She wouldn't even say to me, like, you need to drive. She would do all of that. And I started to get out like that. And then I started to find my confidence again. So she was literally God sent, because if I hadn't had that friendship, I don't know, like how many more months I would have been at home. But then did have some counselling as well, because she suggested it. She said, like, go and see your GP. You can have some counselling. Maybe you're feeling a bit low, a bit, you know. And then I had a bit of counselling, which obviously it doesn't last very long, isn't it? The counselling. So yeah, but then I started to get back on my feet. I think my daughter was about. I think it went on until my daughter was about a year and a half old. This postnatal depression. The first 2 years were pretty rough. I think all in all, 2 years I was not myself.
And it's
Yeah.
interesting to say that there's not a lot of especially in the community, South Asian Indian community, there's not a lot spoken about postnatal depression, and it's interesting you bring it up. And the other interesting thing was when you mentioned the panic attacks. People relate that to mental health, but even that can still have a physical impact, like say the dizziness, the nausea.
Oh yeah, it has all the physical symptoms that you think that there's something wrong with you, but there isn't anything wrong with you, like physically.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And like obviously you said you started your journey on towards recovery. At what point did you cross paths with Seek Your Mind then?
So Seek Your Mind has come a lot later. So I've only started with Seek Your Mind like a couple of years ago.
Okay.
Because after the postnatal depression, there's two other things that happened, but I won't go into a lot of detail. But it will help you understand how why I've gone down this sort of wanting to work for a charity, or wanting to work as part of a charity, and what it is. I actually, obviously, when you have one child, you think, oh, I'll have another one. So I actually had a miscarriage in 2015. And that was actually after having infertility issues. So it's called secondary infertility, when you can't conceive the second time round. So basically, I literally wanted to end my life after. So I felt I basically had the miscarriage. So I actually conceived twins. And I lost those twins at early stage, even after seeing like one heartbeat and things like that. So we knew we were probably likely to lose one, but we always thought we'd come home with the other. Once you see a heartbeat, you think it's going to be all right. So that after that episode in 2015, I became highly anxious and really depressed, because I felt like I'd lost something huge, and I basically didn't want to live at that point in my life. And then that took 2 years of recovery, I would say. And then in 2017, I fell pregnant again, but the single pregnancy that was, and so unfortunately miscarried that one as well. But at that point, I realized that I didn't want to go back there to that place of being anxious and depressed and things like that. And I'm very God-fearing. I believe in God a lot. So I always turn to that part, like the kirtan, for example, is something that I'll always turn to, like, even it doesn't have to be when it's just a bad time, but it's really something that helps me during a bad time. And so at that point, that's when I start. So I'm basically been writing a lot of poetry as well for most of my life. And at that point, I decided that I wanted to put my poetry collection together, and I managed to publish a book a sort of a year later, and then a year after that, I published another one. So again, the first one was more about all these things that we're talking about, things like depression, anxiety, loss, all that, and then healing, love, that kind of stuff. The second one was more about, gratitude and looking at two sides of the coin, trying to change, like mindset focus and how we think. So all of these things that have occurred led me to, obviously, when you start almost realizing your purpose in life, so you start discovering, like, what is your purpose? Why? I started questioning, like, why. I always used to think, why do these things happen to me? Like, it seems like something's always gone wrong, and why is that? And then I started to see that actually maybe there was some purpose in all of these things that had occurred in my life. Rather than feeling sorry for myself, how can I apply them? And I thought I can apply these by maybe trying to help other people through my lived experience. Because yes, you get clinical psychologists, you get well-being practitioners, you get peer support workers, you get, you know, doctors, you get all these great people that have done huge amounts of work to understand psychology and to help people get better, counselors. And but what about the people that go through these things and they have the lived experience of it? Like how can they bring something to the table as well and help other people like themselves? And I just think that that is so valuable as well as all these other people. So that's why I, you know, I had a friendship with a friend who was already part of Seek Your Mind, and I heard that they were recruiting, and then, you know, I was like, I'd love to be part of something like this. And within the Sikh community, like, how amazing is that? Because yeah, it's not well understood, or there isn't that much awareness. And having the Sikhi perspective as well, you know, so there's that spiritual kind of connection to it as well. And really just letting people know that it's all right to have these, just like we have the physical, you know, ailments, you know, mental health, it should not be ignored and or put to the side as it's just something that, you know, it's going to have a stigma attached to it. It's still taboo. It really should not be at this stage, but it is in our community. Yeah. So that was my why, my kind of opening to it.
No, I agree, and I think one key thing you said there was about your experience. We had a talk earlier on in the series about someone having an experience with mental health, but he was disregarded by experts because he's not professionally qualified, etc. But experience for me, in especially with mental health, is just as important as having the qualifications.
It's relatable to people because you can give that, you know, knowledge or advice because you've been through it yourself, and you can say what worked for you might work for you, but you could give tips. So I think it is just as important.
And like with your poetry, and you're trying to produce an outlet again, and people can share. And then, like you said, moving forward now to Seek Your Mind, and you said you were looking forward to working with them, and you mentioned something about spirituality as well. Was there something about meeting someone from Seek Your Mind that said, yes, this is now my place to be?
Yeah, because I always wanted to do something. There was like something calling me to say, everything that's happened to you has happened to you for a reason, you know. And I believe a lot in trust the process. Like when we start blaming, or we start feeling, you know, it's easy to get into that sort of mindset where we start feeling sorry about what's happened in our lives and things like that. But yes, it was everything that I imagined that I could be doing, like in terms of I can bring the Sikhi element into it, like my kirtan. I might end up inspiring someone with that. I can bring the poetry side to it. I can bring, hopefully, you know, my lived experience, and it's also an opportunity for me to learn something as well. I'm so intrigued, like I'm blown away by other people's experiences, because no one experience is the same. And everybody, all, whatever your label or your title, you know, and I'm not one for labels and titles, but whatever it is that they're there to do, they all bring something different. You know, whether they're fully qualified or it's just expert by experience, whatever it is just as valuable. And I think that's where we can end up maybe undermining, you know, that side of it. But yeah, it was just the whole package of it, and being able to go. So I like to do like speaker events and things like that. You know, something that I used to enjoy doing before lockdown. But you know, Seek Your Mind have events like this. I've attended them myself, and I've just found them so fascinating. So when you yourself go to one of these and you think, wow, like they do stuff like this available, more people need to go out and spread this message and let people know. So that's what it was.
No, and the reason why we reached out to Seek Your Mind as well was because the vast variety of content, like we said, like mental health isn't just one thing. So like the experience of yours that we've heard today, that's just one aspect of mental health. That's your experience could be relatable to someone else, but like you said, someone else might have a different experience. And I think the the variety of voices that can be seen just through the Instagram posts alone, I think that makes it very relatable, especially people in the Sikh community, because obviously Sikh Your Mind have got a larger, their following is growing, which we can see, and it's a positive. And I just wanted to ask you, what is the work that Sikh Your Mind are doing now during lockdown?
So now we had some funding from the National Lottery.
And congratulations on that.
So that was a really big achievement for Sikh Your Mind, and we've been able to basically have a telephone line. And what we do is, so I'm also part of this team that supports the telephone line in the evening. So it's open from 7 to 9 in the evenings, and what it is, it's like a triage. So it's somebody calls in, we take down the details, we find out what's been going on with them, and then the whole aim of it is to find out what they need and what support they need, and to just kind of assess what would be the next step for them. Could it be that they need therapy?
Yeah.
Could it be that they just need to attend some sort of wellness group? Could it be some sort of materials that we can help them with? Do they need to be doing something else? And it's just letting them know, because a lot of people, they okay, the first step is obviously they know that there's something going on within them, and it's admitting, yes, there is something, and it's so hard to make that call in the first place. But then it's, what do you do when you know? And sometimes when you're in that place, like say if you're in a really dark place, it's hard enough admitting that there is a problem, let alone trying to go and get the support for it. And that's where we come in. And I think within the Asian community, it's even so hard for some people to take that first step, because they think, oh, we're going to get judged, or we're going to, all those kinds of things come with it. Yeah. So this telephone line has been, I mean, for me, it's been such an eye-opener, and I've got to speak to so many people, and hear so many accounts of just things that you just never think would happen to people, and you think, God, people go through so much. And I'm just glad that like Sikh Your Mind have been able to get this funding, so that we've been able to actually get some of these people from our community on board and offer them therapy sessions, so they're getting like 6 to 8 therapy sessions. There might be counseling, CBT, referring them to the women's wellness group, that kind of stuff, or just sending them some sort of materials. And we've had people like internationally call and things like that. So it's really been, it's really grown from what we were.
And during lockdown, have you noticed a difference? Has there been more of an intake of calls, or?
Yeah, so at first it was obviously, when you start something like this, it's always about how many people share, this piece of information that we are doing this, right? So the more people, the more awareness there is that this telephone line exists, the more people will get in touch with you. So at the beginning it was slow, but it's picked up now. Like so I do every Tuesday, and I've been most Tuesdays, like I've been busy for the 2 hours of my call. And it means that, everybody's had the chance, I've probably spent longer than I've had to sometimes on a call, but, I think we're all so passionate about it that it's not about the time, actually, it's about what you can give to that. But sometimes we've had calls where people just want to talk. And we're not a listening service as such, but if they need to talk, like, it's nice just to listen to them and be like, we're here.
And the other thing that really stood out for me for Sikh Your Mind was on your website, firstly, like the professionalism within the groups. Obviously you need people that are qualified as well, as long as people with experience. So there's a nice blend there. But then secondly, like some of the terms that you're using on your website, like trustworthiness, or like the Sikh values, like they are compassion, some of them are written in Punjabi as well. And I feel like that there is still which I feel like Sikh Your Mind is bridging, is that gap between mental health and how do we access the older generations who only can speak or read Punjabi. And I think what Sikh Your Mind are doing is quite good there. So have you noticed that there's been uptake in calls amongst elderly people as well?
Yes, definitely. So I can vouch for that, because because we are Punjabi speaking, So even our therapists are Punjabi speaking, it means that the elderly can get that support. And, you know, in the first instance, the way that the calls have come through has been from their children. You know, it has been from their children. They've been like, Mum's maybe not ready yet to talk, but she might be next week if I talk to her. Or do you think you could give her a call? Do you think, you know, you could speak to her? And things like that. And it's like slowly just sort of making them comfortable with the idea. Because how do you describe, I mean, one of the things I really struggle with is we're very good at describing mental health in English, but it's so difficult sometimes to find, maybe, I mean, you know, I feel confident in my Punjabi, but sometimes the way that we can describe it in Punjabi and be compassionate and things like that is trickier, because we are still learning ourselves to support our community, right? So it's almost like, yeah, learning and translating that into our language and our community, really, for our community. So yeah, there's definitely been the calls from, and generally there's young people who can't speak English as well. So I've actually had a few young people who have called up, and they're like, they've not been able to access any kind of therapy because maybe they need to get a translator. It's taking longer through the NHS and things like that. And we've been able to give them that support straight away. And then there's this other thing which is really important, is this cultural understanding. You know, there's some things that maybe if we spoke to somebody from a different culture about our home life or our circumstances or something, and they might not understand it fully from a first-hand experience. But when you speak to somebody else who understands your culture and what it is to live in this within this culture, they will understand you. They will get it. They will get where you're coming from. And I think that's been very important to a lot of our callers as well, that understanding, you know, I haven't been able to move out or something like that, and I'm having X, Y, Z difficulty, and it's affecting my mental health. You know, for some people it'd be, well, why don't you move out? But you know, in our culture, it's not as simple as you can just move out. So, you know, it's just one example, but we, I think, are trying to cover all these areas, really.
No, and I think what's happening is quite impressive, and obviously we'll plug in the details at the end for the contact number for the telephone line, the hours you're open. I think reaching more people. I think when people see like waiting times to speak to a counsellor, how do you know you're going to have a problem in 6 months' time? Mental health doesn't work like that, and I think the fact you're offering, the funding's massive. I think the fact you're offering a service makes it more accessible. I think that's the key thing as well. So not alongside language is the accessibility. And we will be plugging in the details, like I've said,
as well as your page as well,
because I think it's important people can understand what's happening, express their emotions. But yeah, I will plug in the details. And quickly, with regards to your page, because obviously we mentioned poetry throughout, and I just wanted to mention your page as well, Great Thinkers. If you just want to quickly have a quick minute or two about that.
Yeah, so all I'm doing is really on Great Thinkers, all I'm doing is trying to touch on some of these themes, you know, about whether it be about, it's very much mindset based, how we think, how we feel, our thoughts, because I always think, you know, how our state of mind kind of dictates our outcomes. So, you know, how we think is how we begin to feel, then how we feel is how we behave, and then how we behave, it turns into our outcome. And I just think that there's always different points of view, different ways of looking at something. And I just share, whenever something comes up, I just try and share that with others, whether it's be through quotes or whether it be through poetry. I try and do that so that I feel like, you know, on that day, sometimes people just need to hear things like that. Like I remember the days when I needed something to pick me up, or something that makes you think. So, you know, poetry is one of those things, even quotes, where it makes the reader think a little bit about, what does this actually mean? Sometimes it's very literal and it just means one thing. But in like when you're writing poetry, there's always some sort of other message, and it's going to mean different things to different people. So how I've written it is not how you're maybe going to perceive it and how you're going to translate it. And that's the beauty of it. It's what it means to you. And it's also like connecting with other people as well. You know, it's not just about my content, but about the content of others, and sharing that as well, because that's equally important. And I think that we should be using our social media platforms for this kind of thing. The more of us do it, the more people we're helping.
That's it. Yeah, no. And on that note, I do want to thank you for your time, Harmeet. I know it's an in-depth talk, but it's important. And if there's any issues that people are watching now, and there's any issues like postnatal depression, miscarriages, panic attacks, please don't hesitate to call Seek Your Mind. The helpline number will be on. If you want to contact Harmeet on her Great Thinkers page, we'll put the details up for that as well. So please, please, please try and reach out. And thank you for watching. Bye, Harmeet.
Thank you. Bye.